Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. Today, we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by the fantastic Jonathan Kite, currently starring in the Netflix series Dad, Stop Embarrassing Me. And the first thing that I actually wanted to ask you about was because this is such a personal project for Jamie Foxx, and him and his daughter are both executive producers on the show. And so when you first took on the role of playing his best friend in the show, what was really important from his perspective for you to know about this character and to bring forth into your performance?
I think I've known Jamie for a pretty long time, about 12 years. And I've been around him so much in so many different places, whether it was work or play or dinner or things like that. And there's a comfortability that Jamie has around the people that he has kept in his life that I think it's something that I understand because I've been one of those people. And I think that he's trying to bring that energy more than anything. It's sort of the way we interact with people. I mean, it's how we interact, but the way and the sort of comfortability that we can be to like sort of joke around with each other and sort of we're always up for anything. Like, we're guys that like tell jokes and he's like, hey man, I'm here. Can you come meet me right now? Literally 1 a.m. This happened like 6 months ago. I was in bed. He didn't know. He just sent me a text. He's like, hey, are you out? I'm like, I am out. I was not out. And I literally threw on pants and a shirt and I went and met him and we were out for another 2 hours. And I think that there's sort of an energy of Jamie that he has in his life that I'd like to say that I have in my life, which is like, let's go. Like it's like now is there's never a better time than right now. And so I think that two guys like that who do have a real history the way that he and I have together, it's so nice that we're able to sort of bring that into this environment and sort of, and sort of build off of stuff that already exists.
And because of that, with their friendship in the show, they've been friends since high school. So they've known each other since childhood and have always been super close. But because of that dynamic that you were just describing with Jamie, did you find yourself doing as much backstory development of what that friendship had been, particularly when they were younger and growing up? Or did you find that because you have that natural chemistry, that it was less of a necessity for this role?
Well, I think that they were writing it, I mean, I don't think that enough credit can be given to the production staff and the writing team on this show, because what some people might realize this, others may not. They were writing it in quarantine. And so we had done the pilot right before. And I think that a lot of things had changed for obvious reasons and then not obvious reasons, like, what was going to be going on, obviously the schedule. And so they were adjusting and adapting on the fly. And then when we got back in August, I mean, that was like one of the apex, certainly, in America here, where I think that no shows were really back yet. So we were one of the first in Los Angeles to go back in August. And so when they were going to write these episodes, they were sort of with me, they were asking me questions, and Jamie and I were sitting down and talking with the writers. How do you feel about this? Because they wanted it to evolve and they wanted us, Jamie, but myself with Johnny, to have a personal connection to it. And so I would sort of throw things out to them and we would bounce ideas back and forth. So it was a very collaborative process and they were incredibly open to my suggestions. So that was, I feel incredibly fortunate to have been a part of that, And so that way we were sort of building on it and we didn't know what it was going to be like week to week. Like my relationship with Chelsea, played by Portia Coleman, we got asked a lot, did you guys know how it was going to end up? And week to week, we didn't know. We were as kept in the dark as the audience was. So it was exciting for us because we didn't know the future, the nature of our relationship.
And within that collaboration that you had the opportunity to have with the writers, what are some of the things that you feel that you were really able to bring into this character as a result of that?
Well, I think Jamie and I share a love for impressions. And that started when we did a video that got released, I think on both of our social media, where we were doing not even dueling Trumps, but just if two Trumps were in a room. And because, you have all this time on set and then there's downtime. And we would sort of, we tell jokes, but then one of us will like start doing Obama and then the other one will agree with his Obama with another Obama. And then for whatever reason, we were both doing Trumps. And he was like, man, we got to work that into the show. Not the Trumps, but like this idea, because that's what friends do, right? That's an actual joking around where there's all these inside jokes, but because we're doing a public figure, it's enough of an outside joke for an outside audience to get half of the joke, even if they don't get all of it. And I really love that about Jamie, because our friendship has a lot of inside jokes. And so some of them hinge on impressions. And so he was like, how can we bring this in there? He's like, what if you were do impressions like people do? What happens to class clowns in high school? And so I was like, yeah, they do other things. Like maybe they're on the radio, or they announce for sports, or they do stand up. And we sort of developed this idea. And that was the one that just seemed to have the most legs, or that would be, in a way, very familiar to people who were obviously fans of Jamie, fans of comedy, fans of David Alan Grier. Instead of, it makes it, and it's also a cool thing because you don't get to see behind the scenes of a comedy club very often. And I think that that's really interesting to people. So we sort of went with that.
Yeah. And, with that episode where your character does do stand up, what was it like, kind of just stripping away your own experience and almost forgetting a lot of what because your character is coming into this, standing on stage for one of the first times and feeling very apprehensive and not necessarily finding his feet straight away?
Can I tell you, that was the craziest episode for me, because they asked me to write a stand-up routine. And I wrote 3 pages of bits. Because this is one of your things where you're like, okay, you can go home and you can do this. And then when I got there, because of the nature of television, I figured that they would just cut it down. But I did have apprehension because it's got to be funny. Because the thing is, when you go do stand-up for the first time or whatever, you do an open mic, the odds of you being funny are 0. I mean, obviously there's famous stories where people like Anthony Jeselnik, who crushed it his first time out, but then he was like his second time out, he was like the worst. So the idea is that you sort of get kicked in the head by a horse, but then you're like, this was fun, let's go do it again. And your friends sort of motivate you, and the team, the group that you're sort of your peers. So for me to have write something that wasn't professional level, but still needed to be funny, because that's the nature of a sitcom. I can't just bomb for like 5 minutes straight in the middle of a comedy show. And so I did it. They liked it. They were very complimentary. Jamie and Bentley, who's the head writer and showrunner, we tweaked it. I did it again. So it's an all new set for the crew and the cast to see. And then for whatever reason, Netflix was like, don't do that, do something else. And so we, in the middle of the taping with the full cast and crew, Jamie and I went off to the side, and he's like, what if we just did this? And I was like, okay. And that was really like, is this going to work? Because throwing all the prepared material out the door and then just having it really be like a first time experience. And literally that's what they went with. And so that was crazy, because it's not that you want to do what you do. Because I always look at us as a team, and I love basketball. So, especially it helps because there's 5 of us. We're the starting 5. So you want to do your part to the best of your ability and contribute to the team. And so I think that all in that moment, I was like, I have an opportunity to do something that isn't being done by anyone else on the show currently. And so what can I do to maximize this part of the storytelling, this experience, this contribution to the best of my ability? And even when it changes, right? Like the play changes in the middle of bringing the ball up the court, like you still have to do the thing that you do, even if it isn't exactly the way you pictured it in your mind. And so I think that was a really cool experience. And I'm thankful that we just kept at it, and they had faith that like, this is going to work. We just need to figure out comedy within the context and structure of this show.
And within finding a lot of the comedic beats and really working out a lot of those scenes, I know that with Two Broke Girls, like having a live studio audience was a huge part of that. And the writers would constantly be rewriting things as you were filming them, because you really feel the energy in the room. And obviously with this show and the pandemic, that's not something that can be done right now. You can't have a live studio audience.
Right.
So did you find yourself really looking to the crew and the rest of your cast in very different ways to kind of feel that out with scenes and to restructure things when you wanted to?
I mean, I think the audience is always super important. I do think, at least from us, because this really works well with stand-up comics, right? And I do think that, like, I remember I did a joke that I pitched, and it did not do well. And David Allen Greer, who I love, he called me out in front of the entire crew. And he was like, he goes, man, don't pitch stuff unless it's going to kill. And then everyone laughed, right? But Jamie turned to me and was like, no, that joke is, he goes, that joke crushes. He's like, we're keeping that in, don't worry. And so the thing is, you sort of, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I know that David was just taking the piss out of me, but I know that sometimes even on Two Broke Girls, a joke didn't land, but you have to trust in the structure of things, that not every joke is going to get, and it's not that the crew didn't think it was funny. It just may not have been like a laugh out loud, like, oh, that was a, because sometimes you smile and they're all wearing masks, right? So you have to trust at a certain point that writing a rhythm on a paper, that one joke is going to feed the other, and they're all not going to get the same reaction, and they shouldn't, right? Because it's like a symphony. And so part of that symphony without a studio audience, which is so loud and present, is you sort of need to start at the beginning when you're germinating, when you're planting the seeds of those jokes, and you're sort of moving along. So did it laugh during the week? Did Jamie laugh at it? Did the writers laugh at it? And then the crew. So if nobody laughs at it, it may be that people in that environment, they're just tired of hearing it. Or like when I did Two Broke Girls, if we'd have to do a take like 3 or 4 times, and they don't laugh at it on the 3rd time, you're like, yeah, because they've already heard it, but you need to trust yourself. You need to trust each other and the writing, that it's strong enough. And so it's a balance, it's kind of because we use stand up, right? Like it's the same thing. You do a joke that you're like, man, this killed last night. Don't necessarily throw it out because it didn't get the same reception the next night in a completely different environment.
And with your stand-up as well, one of the other things is also thinking very specifically about who the audience is in the room, and what some of the references are that you're making. You're going to pull out different cultural references when you're playing to a college audience, then you're playing certain cities.
Yeah.
And with this show in particular, obviously with it going out on Netflix and knowing that there's going to be that very international audience to it, were there any conversations about what some of the references within the show should be, and making sure that it was going to have that real universality to the comedy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the most impressive things that I can say about Jamie Foxx is he is so current. Like knowing him the entire time, he is so up on pop culture, and I always think about like, what a cool thing for his daughters to have a father who's relevant and understands, not in the same capacity as them because they're living it differently, but that's sort of the joke about dads, right? Is that dads are sort of like they dress like the last year they thought they were cool. That's what I always think, right? Or when you see a dad with an old haircut, you're like, oh, so you really loved the year 1987. We got it. Where it's like Jamie is like still cool and so I think that really helps, because more people are going to understand it, especially with the digital age now, where and I think that that's a very cool thing, because it's authentic to his personality. It's not like you're taking, somebody who is not in that world and being like, who Megan Thee Stallion is, right? Okay, cool. Because we're going to review it. And so it's cool to have somebody who actually lives and breathes those references. I mean, his impressions are current, and he does enough old impressions, like not old in terms of like, not relevant, but like he did Jerry Jones the other day on ESPN. He does the best Doc Rivers I've ever heard in my life. Like he's doing the gamut of these people that everybody knows. And I think that really helps, because at the end of the day, Jamie, and of course, Kyla Drew, who plays his daughter, that story, they are the show. So the fact that it's grounded in their ability, and specifically his real life, he has the receipts, right? Like he can do generational impressions, including people who are super young. And I think that he's bringing that to the table. It's a dimension that we're just not seeing from people. And so I think internationally, because he is so big and so popular, I just feel like the people that love him overseas, or this is just going to be another thing that they can love him in.
And then I remember with Two Broke Girls, when that show started, that one of the things that you were discussing was how it felt very relevant to a lot of things that were going on at the time, and that it really kind of like picked up from that world that we were in post-recession. And then obviously with this show, I was really curious about the way that you wanted to bring a lot of things, particularly into your character being a white cop within Atlanta, and how you really thought about cultural conversation and how you could pull that into him.
I mean, I think you just said it, right? It's conversation. The truth is that we are not communicating as a country. And at the end of the day, it starts at home. It starts with having the communication with each other, and it's a generational conversation. It's many things, but the thing that I think that I'm really proud of, amongst a thousand things about this show, is the conversation that's happening in the home, and that's where it starts. And to say, because I think that a lot of times the communication isn't being had, or even if we are having it, there can always be more of it. It starts with your family and the core people, and and being responsible for each other, and having that conversation because the other thing is, the American family is changing. Like, obviously there's so many single parent households, and to normalize that's very normal. Like, that's not, and I think that that's okay. And it's great. And the fact that, a father, David Allen Greer, his son, Jamie Foxx, his daughter, Kyla Drew, his sister, are all living under one roof. And then me, sort of living under there without paying rent. It's the best part of my job. That, that we are a family. Obviously I'm not blood related to them, but that's my family. And I think that part of family is the people you choose to have in your life, the people that you would protect with your own life, which you see obviously in the later episodes. And so that we communicate, and that we are responsible for each other and ourselves to be as committed to that communication and not only it's because it is a sensitive subject, but to be as committed to upholding and respecting one another and our beliefs as much as we possibly can, that it starts there. And then that's, you can only be responsible for yourself and for the people that you love. And then hopefully with enough communication and those groups start talking with another, we can change people's minds. And that's what I think is part of what we're trying to do.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about your impression work in general and the way that you bring that into so much of your comedy, because what's really interesting about the way that you do it is you bring these characters and you never take them too far out of what would be their actual reality to keep it really grounded. And so I wanted to ask about the way in which, when you're putting an impression into a comedy piece, you always structure it in that way, and how you really find what the situation is going to be to derive the comedy from.
I think if you need to keep things grounded, because it's already, the situation is sort of not believable. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but I used to do an impression of Anthony Bourdain, one of my favorite people ever. And, I thought it was so, people just like him. So my thing was, what else would he be able to narrate that would, like, the craziest thing that he could narrate, or a show that people would watch him be a part of. Now, I wouldn't necessarily take Anthony Bourdain and go have him shoe shopping, right? Because that, like, not that people don't care that he wears shoes, but it needs to be something that people are already on board with, so that when I say that he is going to have a travel show in Westeros, or in, like, Wakanda, that these are places that we are familiar with and enjoy them, respectively, even if he wasn't there. And then to take somebody that we love and we like to see navigate through those things, what would be his opinions on the cuisine of Wakanda, or, like, Westeros, which is something that nobody, I think, even thinks about. But my God, people in Wakanda have to eat, right? What do they eat? And so that always did, that would be as crazy as I would take it, because I would see impressionists that I really admired. And I think that for me, what I wanted to do is make everything as just above. Like, I didn't want to, not that I didn't want to do an exact sound alike, but I wasn't trying to mimic. And I think in part of it is you need to exaggerate, but not to the point of a caricature. And so I think that the sound alike, the body movement, but that really matters in the perspective and the environment in which you place them. So, like, you move it too far to the left or right, no matter how good you sound like that person or how funny the joke is, if people are ever for a second having to wrap their mind around the scenario, you've sort of already lost them.
And because you do so much voiceover work and not just doing singular characters on shows, but multiple characters on shows, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your process in that, and how that really, what the similar parts of your process are in developing those characters to something like Dad Stop Embarrassing Me, and then the places where you have to think and structure things very differently, especially when you are doing multiple characters and they've all got to have their own individual characteristics, their own kind of worldview, their own voice, and all of those aspects.
Yeah, I mean, I think I take it by a case basis, because I try never to put the cart before the horse, because when we wrote the Reverend Chuck E. change that's in the show, that was something that came up last minute, and Jamie was just like, he's like, can you just do because I wanted to play him like Joel Osteen for a second, like that was sort of this idea that I had, but because it was going to be seen on the iPad, he needed to be an exaggerated sort of thing. But so I sort of took him to a point, and then I added a couple things in the writing where I thought would be insane, and then we pulled it back. And I don't mean insane like not believable, but I just mean these are actually out there. What's the largest thing believably that somebody could ask for as a religious figure, and then pull it back just a little bit, because the wig and the glasses are doing half the work. You don't, that's the thing is, when I knew he was going to look that way and I had a fat suit on, I'm like, you could almost ground this guy and to have him be like an NPR host, because he already looks so, like so flashy, and you really can't tell him the thing, but I'm wearing so much gold. I'm giving Midas a run for his money. Like, it's unbelievable how much gold I have on in there. And so I think with that also helps when you know how the costumers and the makeup people are going to do. And again, we're all working together. So as soon as I saw that that's how much I had on, I was like, oh, you don't need to be that loud. I'm like, this wig is the loudest thing in the room right now. And so that was really funny. And so I think that, again, I try to bring it halfway, and then the other designers bring it their halfway, and we meet in the middle. And sometimes they're like, you know what? We're going to go with your natural hair. So I go, oh, well, it's not that crazy. So I may have to bump him up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to talk to us all about the show, and congratulations on the entire series. Excited for everybody to see it.
Thank you so much. It was so nice. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time.